Did you know that the ancient Egyptians were actually ruled by Greek pharaohs for almost 300 years? So, how did this happen? That's where this first episode of Greek pharaohs ruling Egypt will talk about. When you think of ancient Egypt, what comes to mind are the pyramids, the Sphinx, the pharaohs with their iconic headwear, and the mummies. What most people don't know about actually is that the ancient Egyptians were ruled over by Greek pharaohs, actual pharaohs, for almost 300 years. To understand how this happened, we need to look at the situation right before these Greek pharaohs took over. So the year is around 350 before Christ BC, and most of the known world is conquered by the Persian Empire. This vast Persian Empire stretches from modern-day Pakistan to Georgia, Armenia, Turkey, then downwards to Syria and also Egypt. Egypt is part of this big multi-ethnic empire that's ruled by the Persians. Of course, these Persians, they didn't just convince all these peoples to join their empire. It was also an empire who just went out there and conquered all these regions, subjugated these different peoples. But nonetheless, the Persian Empire was, for the time, relatively accepting of other cultures and other peoples. So they divided their empire in different satrapies. These satrapies were similar to what you could call a province today, and every province, every satrapy was ruled over by a satrap, by a governor. This whole empire with the different satrapies, they all have their different governors, and one of those satrapies is Egypt. Egypt, as a region, was part of one satrapy in the Persian Empire. The Egyptians, while they were part of the Persian Empire, they had relative cultural, religious freedom, but these Persians, they never really showed a lot of respect or interest in the local customs. The local religion was not important to them. The most important thing to these Persians were, of course, as with any empire, the taxes. But from the very start, those Persians also sometimes disrespected this local Egyptian culture. One very famous example is how holy cats are in ancient Egyptian religion. Cats are holy creatures, and these Persians knew this. So when they tried to conquer Egypt, they used this to their advantage, and they used cats as living shields against the Egyptians. Maybe not en masse, but this happened. So, the Egyptians, after years of occupation, after not really being able to express their own culture and history completely, because you have to understand at this point Egypt and the Egyptian culture is already over 2000 years old. The ancient Egyptians have their own very distinct cultures, traditions and history. As I said, the pyramids, the Sphinx, all of this was already built. All of this was at this point already ancient for those modern, let's call them modern Egyptians. So the Egyptians, they did not want to be part of this Persian Empire, but on their own they were not strong enough to repel the invaders and get freed from the Persian occupation. To understand how this changed, we need to look again at the borders of the Persian Empire, which, as I said at that time, it stretched from the Indus Valley, India, Pakistan, all the way to Egypt, and then also to Turkey in the north. At that time, Turkey, or Anatolia as it was called, was under Greek influence. The Greeks were all over the Mediterranean, but of course mainly in Greece and also Anatolia, which was Turkey at that time. The Persians at that point had tried to also conquer Greece, which was at the edge of their empire. They had tried this many times. The most important, or maybe let's say most famous instance of this, is when the 300 Spartans under King Leonidas tried to repel an attack, tried to stop and hold an attack from the Persians. In reality, those were not 300 Spartans. They were helped by a lot of other Greeks. Nonetheless, this is an important part of the Greek resistance against the Persians. And after that point, the Persians kept trying this many times. So the Greeks, just like the Egyptians, they had a lot of hate for the Persians. And at a certain point, Alexander the Great, he took power of Greece. He united the Macedonians and the Greeks, and he tried to attack the Persian Empire. He attacked the Persian Empire, he invaded Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. He continued on downwards to Syria, then to modern-day Lebanon, and finally his army reached Egypt. When these Greeks and Macedonians arrived in Egypt, they were seen as liberators. Just like the Egyptians, they had been fighting against these Persians for so long that there was a certain kind of connection between the two peoples. Of course, these Greeks and Macedonians, under the leadership of Alexander the Great, they were not really interested much in freeing Egypt, but more so occupying it and making it part of their empire. But in contrast to the Persians, these Greeks and Macedonians, they actually tried to show respect to the local Egyptian culture. From the very start, Alexander the Great tried to make some connections between Greek and Egyptian culture, but also mythology and religion. Alexander the Great, he claimed that he was the son of Zeus, the Greek god, but also the Egyptian equivalent called Amun. So by presenting himself also as the son of Amun, he tried to make the Egyptians sympathize with his occupation. He also visited the oasis, the temple at Siwa, and in general they tried to have respect for the Egyptian customs. So they stayed in Egypt for a while and then continued their conquest towards the remaining part of the Persian Empire, while also, of course, still occupying Egypt as a part of their new Greek Macedonian Empire. So at this point, Egypt becomes a satrapy, a province not of Persia, but of Greece and Macedon. Alexander the Great, he continues with his army and his generals towards the rest of the Persian Empire, which is further east towards modern-day Iraq, towards modern-day Pakistan, Iran, and he defeats the rest of the Persian Empire. When he has defeated the entire Persian Empire, his army returns to Babylon, which is in the center, and Alexander ends up getting sick and dying. At this point, in his deathbed, Alexander the Great, he does not have an heir, he does not have a follower for the throne. So what does he say? I leave my empire to the strongest of my generals. And all these generals, they all take a little piece of Alexander's empire and create their own little Greek kingdom with that piece of land. One of them is the Seleucus, who took control of more the region in Syria, created the Seleucid Empire. But then the most important one of his generals, also and one of Alexander's very best friends, called Ptolemy. And Ptolemy, he takes control of Egypt. He also crowns himself as Pharaoh of Egypt. He makes this his own country, and he starts the Ptolemaic Dynasty. And this is actually the start of 300 years of Greek rule in Egypt. He starts this dynasty, and he starts it by proclaiming himself as Ptolemy I Soter. And Soter means liberator, which is very ironic because he just replaced the Persians.